Yeah, we're now live on YouTube, Chair.
Great, thank you. So a proper good morning to everybody, and thank you for coming along to today's meeting, which is technically the December meeting of the EAP, but we've moved it forward just by a few days. So we're going to start off with our first agenda item, which is any apologies for absence.
I've received no apologies.
Great, thank you. And moving on to the second item, which is members' declarations of interest. Does anybody need to make a declaration? I see shaking of heads, so I think we're all good there. Great. Item number 3 is minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of October. Is everybody happy with those? Yeah, thumbs up, nods of heads. That's good. So we'll sign those off. And very quickly, we find ourselves then at the first substantive item, which is an air quality strategy update. And we're going to have that presented to us by Kira Longman, who is an air quality project officer. So I will hand over to you, Kira, to take us through that.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I just check, am I sharing my screen or has someone already got it?
If you could share your screen, that would be great. If not, I can get up on mine.
Great. Okay, no problem. Can you see this?
Yeah, can we see that?
Great. Okay. Okay, hello everyone. I've got a lot of information for you today, and I will try to get through it as quickly as possible because I do know that we're constrained with time. So first of all, I wanted to address that every year we have a statutory duty to monitor nitrogen dioxide pollution throughout the council area and report it to DEFRA. Consistently within the former districts of Northamptonshire, the levels of nitrogen dioxide pollution have been below the legal limit values, and the highest location was in Kettering at 33 micrograms per metre cubed. Okay, so in 2022, the concentrations were below pre-pandemic levels. Which is very interesting because it was thought that it might take longer for the pandemic effect where levels were dropped, to come back up, but these were below pandemic levels. And it's possible it is due to the better efficiency of cars and the increase of Euro numbers for the cars. So DEFRA approved our report. Also to note that PM10 and PM2.5, which are fine particulate pollution, are not measured within our district, our areas. And the nearest monitoring station is in Northampton, and that recorded 10 micrograms per metre cubed, which is below the current legal limit of 20 micrograms per metre cubed. Okay, DEFRA also noted that the Voice Scooter project that our carbon management team have been putting in place was really good, and they also noted that the Greenway project will really help to reduce emissions. And they praised us for starting to develop a local air quality strategy. Okay, so I will just first of all mention that DEFRA has a statutory duty to produce an air quality strategy for England every 5 years. That was held earlier this year when it reached the 5-year limit, and they consulted for only 10 days. So I guess it was a bit of a rush job getting it through there. But what I'll take you through is some of the points that are really important that they published in their final air quality strategy for England. So all local air qualities are expected to take proactive action to improve air quality, and Northamptonshire is doing that. local authorities are encouraged to publish a local air quality strategy. And that's what we are doing and going out to consultation on next year. Directors of public health should be involved in producing the local air quality strategy. So we have involved public health and asked them to participate and comment on the draft strategy. Okay, so a big issue now that DEFRA is pushing is PM2.5, ultra fine particulate matter. And these are some of the sources for ultrafine particles. Domestic coming in around 27% of the total amount in the UK, and 39% for combined industrial processes. Because the domestic level is high, the big push is on looking at smoke control areas. Now, I do want to also note that other sources of fine particulates come from natural sources such as pollen, sea spray, Saharan wind desert storms that carry fine particles over and reach the UK. Okay, now a big decision that the council needs to make is about smoke control areas, which were originally adopted from the 1960s smogs. And this legislation has now been updated. So we need to decide whether we revoke the current smoke control orders for the whole of Northamptonshire and then establish a new order for the whole of the area, because at the moment we only have smoke control areas in Corby. So alternative number 2 is to revoke the current smoke control orders and issue new smoke control orders for all of the towns in Northamptonshire. So without having monitoring data, we can't legally justify these options, and we do need to get more information on the levels of fine particulates throughout Northamptonshire. Now, the recommendation is to do nothing at the moment and retain the Corby smoke control areas. And the final option is to revoke the Corby smoke control areas. And but we also need to justify it if we do. Okay, so for any current smoke control orders, we need to make a decision if we're going to implement civil penalties. And these are currently being used in housing offences and immigration offences. The difference between civil penalties and fixed penalty notices is that you can have different amounts up to £20,000. So it's not a fixed amount. However, no local authority has yet implemented this in England. So it is recommended that we see how it works, first of all, before going in to implement it. So we'll use our existing powers for dealing with smoke control, which currently is using nuisance legislation, and that can involve issuing fines and court appearances. Okay, now also one of the areas that DEFRA want us to look at is vehicle idling, and this is particularly prevalent around schools, primary schools in particular. And what we need to do is look at whether we want to introduce fixed penalty notices or penalty charge notices. So with FPNs, we require the driver's details to be able to issue a fine. With PCNs, we don't require this. However, we do need to put in place a traffic management order. So parking officers would issue the fines. There's a low level of offences, so no increase in staff would be required to do this. Now, there is the possibility of also using the civil penalty notices, but we would need to look at the finer legal details of that and how the scheme is working. Okay, so indoor air quality is another area that DEFRA is now progressing. And so the question we've been looking at is whether we include indoor air quality in the local air quality strategy. But what we require is a lot more information from DEFRA about indoor air quality, and they will be providing more guidance for all local authorities in the future. It hasn't come out yet. So how this will get integrated in the council is through housing policy, through the joint strategic needs assessment with public health and social care guidance. So indoor air quality involves the use of domestic burning. Chemicals used in the household are a major source of, for improving indoor air quality. Okay, so DEFRA has requested that all local authorities publish a local air quality strategy, irrespective of whether they breach legal limit values for pollution. And so we have done this and currently being finalised through internal consultation. Then we plan to go to external consultation in early 2024. And with air quality strategies, it's a cross-department collaboration with transport, with public health, with the carbon management team. Okay, so public health measures is having air quality integrated into the JSNA, working together to raise awareness of the public health impacts of air pollution. And in the future, we want to work with public health in publicising more what the health impacts of ultrafine particles are, and working with practitioners in primary and secondary healthcare. Okay, so with planning, air quality is embedded in Northamptonshire Council strategic plan. Environmental protection is consulted on planning applications, and the adoption of an air quality supplementary planning document will ensure a unified approach across all 4 districts. So the sustainable transport measures are actioned by our transport team, and many of the projects and policies that they are implementing align with reducing air pollution. So we really want to increase net zero vehicle uptake and infrastructure. Active travel is important, and the Greenway project, which embeds cycling and walking infrastructure into those areas, is very important. Public transport improvement schemes. So at the moment, there's the Smart and Connected Corby scheme, which I've been speaking with Kia, who are the consultants who've been brought on board to do this, and they're going to have traffic sensors looking at the vehicle mix on the roads, the flow of traffic, and there will be air quality sensors there. Now, the air quality sensors that they use are not as accurate as those adopted and approved by DEFRA. However, it gives us a good indication of where the areas we need to look at will be. Okay, carbon reduction measures. The majority of measures outlined by our carbon reduction management team also benefit air quality, and so working closely with them on reducing emissions is our priority. So the climate change strategy, electric scooter project, and the Starship robots project are all great projects that reduce carbon and reduce air pollution. Our taxi licensing team have new guidelines, and from the 31st of March 2025, new and replacement taxis must be Euro 6. And all new applications must be hybrid or net zero. And then from the 1st of January 2031, only hybrid and net zero vehicles can be licensed. Okay, so for particulate pollution measures, the Corby smoke control areas will remain for now. And within these areas, the population is restricted from the sale of non-compliant fuels, and you can only use approved appliances or fuel. And our trading standards team are leading in looking at the retailers and responding to any complaints if any non-compliant fuels are being sold. And then environmental health would also go out to any complaints of people using non-compliant fuel in a wood burner or fireplace. Okay, so another big area of particulate pollution is construction, and construction sites often create a lot of dust. So we are tightening up on dust control mitigation on construction sites, and we've outlined lots of information for developers to make sure that they're implemented on building sites. Okay, so just to give you an idea of using accurate measuring for particulates, we have a so the legal limit is 20 microns per meter cubed, but we have a target for 2028 to reduce it to 12. And that's the red line you see there. So in Northampton, we are under, oops, sorry, I can't go back. Okay, we're under. And just to show you Newham in London, which also has London City Airport, all of their monitoring stations are below the 2028 target value. So that is good news. Okay, now moving on to our air quality supplementary planning document. Wellingborough already had an air quality SPD adopted, and they used the East Midlands Consortium of Local Authorities. So this is a few years old and needed to be updated. And we're going to include the whole of Northamptonshire area so that we're all aligned. And so we're going to consultation in early 2024, and that would be for a 6-week period. And you've been provided with the documents for the draft documents for the strategy and the planning document. With the process, have a look at number 2 up here. We used to have 3 classifications, but what I decided was that it would be better to have it align with when planning applications are validated, minor and major applications, just to make it streamlined and easier to apply. And air quality modelling will only be required for large-scale major applications, for example, environmental impact assessment. And large major scale will require more mitigation than the minor or major applications. Okay, so the mitigation is looking at construction dust, and applicants will need to provide a mitigation statement on how they're going to abate dust and dust nuisance from the site. Zero emissions recharging infrastructure. This is now handled through building regulations, but we have put it in here because we do want to make sure that it is out there in the forefront. So having cycle parking facilities, which we already do as part of our transport policy. And an important thing is low nitrogen oxide gas boilers. So having boilers that have very little NOx emissions. This is also outlined in BREEAM, which is the Sustainable Code for Housing Developments, to have low NOx boilers. Another introduction is outdoor space, which is located away from busy roads. Green infrastructure and planting around developments. And large-scale major developments will need to offset emissions through Section 106 agreements. Okay, so we have also applied for an air quality grant through DEFRA, and DEFRA's major focus is on ultrafine particles. So to improve our understanding of what the concentrations are like in Northamptonshire, we have applied for a grant that will give us 10 sensors. Now, at the moment, the limit value is 20 micrograms per meter cubed, going down to 12 by 2028. We submitted the application in September, and hopefully we'll hear back by early 2024. Now, if we are not successful in getting the money, we'll get really, really useful feedback that we can apply and use in our next bid next year. And the consultants that we're working with are Ricardo. They used to be part of the Atomic Energy Agency, and they've got a lot of experience working on air quality grant projects. So, yeah, managed by Ricardo. It's going to be a 4-year project, 10 air quality sensors, monitoring PM2.5 to PM10 and nitrogen dioxide. And each sensor will monitor over a 1-year period and will have 40 locations in total. And this is where we're going to work with our colleagues in deciding which residential areas to focus on, which schools, hospitals, and also care homes. Okay. Also, a bespoke website will be created to help raise public awareness about air pollution, so that all of the sensor data will be presented there. There'll be monthly information posts about reducing pollutants and, for instance, domestic burning, and local monthly social media posts. Now, just a note that the sensor data is only plus or minus 50% accurate. So Ricardo are putting in place co-locations of the monitors so that we can adjust the readings and make them more accurate than they are. Okay, so do we have any questions?
Thank you, Kira, for taking us through that. I'm sure there will be questions. That was useful to get the broad overview of it and to see how it ties in with so many other policies that the council has. So hands are going up now. Go to Councillor Dell first.
Thanks, Chair. Just quickly, I forgot to declare an interest earlier. I currently work for Brightways, who have helped consult with the Corby LC Whip, which is important for the next agenda item. But I do have some questions as well. Thank you so much, Kira. Sorry, that was a brilliant presentation, and the documents and background are very extensive and very well done. I just got some questions. Can you go through the benefits versus what would be your preferred solution for CPNs or FPNs for idling outside schools? I know obviously that schools, with the tailpipe emissions being a lot closer to children due to their height, and
yes,
one pickup. And especially in the colder weather, where parents like to leave the engines running because to keep the aircon. Yeah. But I mean, if we were to introduce one of these, I think a really good thing would be to put a lot of press out about it, so that there's sort of like the stick, if you like, so that, although
Yes.
we don't have the enforcement officers to actually go and check every school, just the knowledge that it's possible would be really good, because I don't think it's super well promoted that people don't know that well that it is illegal to keep your car idling.
Mm-hmm.
How do you answer that?
Yeah. So I've been involved with a few schemes in London, and we do take the softly approach first of all. So you do need the public messaging to go out there, let people know how bad idling is for health. And the enforcement officers, first of all, would give people warnings and not immediately issue fines. So, the parking officers would speak to them and then come back at another date and check. So the public messaging is important and vital to running this scheme. Now, whether you use a penalty charge notice, which is the easier way of doing it. However, you can only use it on public roads. Sometimes we get lots of nuisance complaints about idling within residential apartment parking schemes. So you wouldn't be able to enforce it in private roads or private parking areas. So that's the downfall of using the traffic management order approach. We don't know at the moment about civil penalty notices. That will need, a proper understanding of and guidance through the legislation for implementing them. As I said, it's been used for housing offences and immigration offences so far.
Brilliant, thank you. Just a couple of others. Just this is a quick one. In the report, it mentions net zero vehicles. Is that EVs, or does that cover other vehicles as well?
So we don't have many hydrogen vehicles, unfortunately. That's an area I'm more interested in the use of hydrogen, but any net zero vehicles.
Okay, brilliant.
And I don't know too many other commercial ones that have been put out there.
All right. Just regarding the Corby smoke control area, it had the big tick on it about the enforcement for that.
Yes.
There's no enforcement elsewhere in Northampton because there's no smoke control area. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
And you mentioned construction.
The big thing to remember was that the smoke control orders were placed because of the 1960s smogs, where concentrations were, not even were exponentially higher than what they are now. Yeah.
Regarding construction dust, what controls?
Yes.
Are the construction sites inspected and dust? How does that work at the moment?
At the moment, they're not inspected. The developers. Oops, hold on. Sorry. My fencing can be put up with Hessian, bags over them. Dampening down dust piles. There is a whole lot of different techniques, and we've provided all of that in the supplementary planning document as an appendix.
Okay, and my final question, PM 2.5 ultrafine particles. Can you give us some more examples? I know about like brake dust and tyres and things, but what else is there?
Yes. Okay, so industrial emissions, although they are regulated and have filters on their emissions, there's still a lot that come from industrial emissions. And interestingly, DEFRA hasn't said anything about that in their air quality strategy for England. The big focus is on domestic burning.
Okay, and finally,
so you saw the graph, and there are more emissions coming from industrial sources than there are residential. but there's no correct on that.
And just finally, I know that the World Health Organization have updated their guidance on the. I don't think DEFRA's adopted that. Do you see any issues for North Northamptonshire if that is adopted?
So whenever you adopt legislation, so the World Health Organization, their values are aspirational because they don't get them legally adopted. And I've actually looked, because I'm a toxicologist by background, and I've looked for all the research on the lowered values, can't find it. It's not open, it's not out there in the public. So when our government has to produce limit values, they have to provide all of the research that about how the guideline limits were adopted. So DEF hasn't done that with the World Health Organization limits at the moment. Maybe they're doing it at, presently, but they haven't legally adopted, because once you legally adopt it, that's it. It can be legally challenged. You have to make sure that your information is tight.
Thank you. That's all my questions. You've answered them wonderfully. Thank you.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you.
Before I go to Councillor O'Hara, I'm just going to go to Ian Smith, as I can see your hands up, and it's probably not a question.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a couple of points to Kira's responses to Councillor Dell. I think the issue with respect to Corby being seen distinctly differently in terms of legacy authorities with smoke control areas is there is a factor of the steel works in Corby, because clearly that was a major issue in terms of industrial air pollution in the town, which caused a different approach to be taken there, I think, to the other legacy areas. And in terms of the construction dust, that's largely addressed really through environmental health taking action in terms of nuisance, and also through the planning regime in terms of developers would have to submit a construction design and management statement for most developments, which would sort of address how they were going to deal with construction dust type issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor O'Hara.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a couple of questions. I agree with what Ian's just said about with the construction dust on developments. What concerns me is that we're looking to kind of sort out taxis, etc., and make sure that we're working towards net zero. How's that going to be financed in the future if vehicles have to be low emissions, given the cost of electric vehicles? They're going to have hybrid ones. Are there going to be grants available? Because also we've just done a review of our taxis and how they can form, and how they can pick up fares and that, and given the cost of fuel, etc. Now I think that's another on cost for them. So I think there needs to be a lot of education out there. So that's the way we're going to go. That's the first question. The second question is really to do with new estates, etc. A lot of them aren't adopted because it's just the way it is these days. So they have their own companies that look after the actual new developments, new housing developments. So they're all private roads. So I don't know how we can actually monitor areas that are deemed private, especially when it comes to children's play areas, because a lot of the leaps that are put into new developments now are actually on roads. Now, you said they're on main roads. So on some of them, because of the size of the developments, they're actually on a main road, in my eyes, because they're built near neighbourhood centres. I mean, I've got one on a estate near me, and it's actually on the bend of a road, and one right in the middle of a crescent where the play area is. So I don't know how we go about monitoring the air quality there for children, because you've got all these boilers still being installed. We're still not using ground source and air source heat pumps because they're still expensive, and a retrofit is very expensive. But to even put them in now, developers don't seem to be pushing for that. And I don't know whether with the review that we're doing with Air Climate, whether that's something that could be pushed with developers. So it'd be interesting to hear what your take might be on those things, please.
Okay. So that was the second question. You were talking about boilers.
Yeah, I'm just saying that because of the boilers obviously affect the air quality because of the output from them. And if you've got play areas that are built right up to housing and shops, etc., you've still got all that air quality being mitigated against, if you like, because you've got everything pouring into that area. Everything's so closed in nowadays, that our open spaces aren't what they should be. So, it's mitigating against that in built-up areas. And if you're like for a development on the East of Kettering, once it hits 2,500 houses, we're going to have to build a new road, and we are going to have a new school up there. So it's looking at the air quality there. When that's going to be built, I think in an area that's going to be a main route through off junction 10 of the A14.
So through the application, they will need to do some modelling of the air quality, because that's a big development. And what I recommend is actually doing some diffusion monitoring at sites like that, for a few months, so that you can get a good idea of what the air quality is like there. But the good news is that no areas throughout monitoring, no area.
Sorry, Kira, we're having trouble hearing you. I'm afraid it's cutting in and out.
Okay, yeah, it's cutting in and out. Having green infrastructure around playgrounds is really important. But nitrogen dioxide pollution is decreasing in general. So in the next few years, we will see it go down more. Now, with taxi licensing, I'm afraid I'm not an expert on that. So I don't know if Ian or Catherine might be able to answer that question.
I'll try and help out, Chair, with the taxi licensing issue. I think obviously there's an issue here around timing and where we're at in terms of our aspirations, in terms of trying to improve local air quality, and how taxi licensing relates into that, because obviously we've made these climate change commitments. And obviously what we want to try and do is encourage early adoption, I guess, in relation to electric vehicles within the trade, and try and move to a cleaner taxi fleet moving forward. I guess we do have to be aware, though, alongside that, about how government policy is moving with respect to that, and what government guidance it is suggesting, and also what funding may be available to support the local trade to sort of try and make that change. So I think what we've done in terms of our policy is set out what we want to try and achieve in terms of our aspirations, which are largely those dates that Kira's quoted. However, we have to recognise that if effectively things don't move forward in line with that in terms of the wider economy and in terms of government guidance, we might need to review those timelines going forward if the technology doesn't effectively allow those dates to be met. And I think what we did say when we implemented the policy is it would be subject to regular review. And this was one of the areas where we anticipated there might be some changes going forward in line of things moving forward, or maybe not moving forward at the pace that was originally suggested.
Thank you.
I agree with that, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other points on that one at the moment? Doesn't look like it. My understanding is obviously go to consultation hopefully early next year, and then we'll come back at a different point to this EAP, I would expect, to discuss it further and look at it through that. So plenty of time to ask some more questions at a future date and look at more areas of it. Thank you very much, Kira, and Ian, for taking us through that, and Catherine as well for your work on it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, great. So now we're going to go on to item 5, which is a bit of an update on the Corby Local Walking and Cycling Infrastructure Plan public consultation. So I will hand over to Sally to take us through this. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Good morning, Chair. Is it okay if I share my screen to put up the presentation? Right. Excuse me, just one sec while I. Can someone just let me know that they can see that? Okay,
Yep.
brilliant. Good morning. If I haven't met you before, my name's Sally Crew. I'm the Interim Transport Strategy Manager here at North Northants. I'm going to take you through a bit of an update on the Corby LC Whip. I know that you have seen the Kettering LC Whip a couple of times and also have been engaged in this consultation. So I'm going to speed through the first section, which is more just an intro to LC Whips generally, so we can spend a little more time focusing on the consultation, feedback, and how we move forward. But if that pace is a little too fast, then please feel free to slow me down, and we can spend a bit more time on that intro. So as I said, in terms of what I'm going to speak about today is just a general intro to the LC Whip, an overview of where we're at with the Corby and how we got to this position, an update on the consultation results, and then a further update on the 2 further LC Whips that we have on our books. So LC Whips form part of our broader transport policy framework. They were introduced in early 2020s, and we have been working on LC Whips for some time. It's important that you recognise that they form part of our wider policy framework. So they reference both our local plan, they form part of our local transport plan, but they also work with some of our other policies, and specifically the Greenway policy, which I know that you've seen before and have been engaged with. So hopefully this is familiar to you. The guidance comes from government, and they are very much seen as part of the delivery of the gear change policy, and in doing so are focused on our towns and cities and the government target of doubling walking and cycling within towns and cities. They have a strong role within our policy framework. They show our commitment to walking and cycling, and slightly more broader, they act as a leverage for accessing support and funding from particularly Active Travel England. In terms of the process that we go through, it's a 6-stage process. I'm sure you've seen this slide many times before, but what underpins the development of the LC Whips is both the technical auditing and consistent procedures that are applied across the country, but also the engagement with the community to get buy-in throughout the process and throughout the adoption. And if we move on to Corby specifically, you'll see that we've had a slightly stop-start approach to Corby, which has had the added benefit of an additional stage of engagement. So we started the Corby LC Whip in early 2022, and it's been through its development since that time. We've had 3 sets of stakeholder engagement in July, in September, and in December. There's a really fundamental role that those engagements provide. They inform our auditing, they inform the prioritisation, and they also ensure that we encapsulate the views from the community, our technical stakeholders, and that we are developing in a methodical and a consistent way. What I draw your attention to is the step 4, which is the route audits that are undertaken. They're done through a step methodology that form part of the LC Whip. And if you've read through an LC Whip in detail, that will be the endless prioritization tables that you see. They're informed by that process. So if everyone's happy with that quick run through of the LC Whip development, I'll move on to the actual consultation that we undertook and the feedback from that. So just as a bit of an aid memoir, this is the extent of the Corby Whip, which was one of the initial outputs from the first stakeholder engagement, looking at what areas do we encompass. And it was very clear from that workshop that inclusion of the SUEs was a critical part of that. So that is something that was included, and also the relationship with the Greenway strategy, which I think we'll come back to both further in the presentation and then perhaps within the questions as well. So through that development phase, so particularly through that stage 4 network planning, we identified a set of cycling routes. That was done through looking at both the levels of usage, looking at the propensity for cycling, so the potential uplift in cycling, the road's role within the network, and then having that feedback through the community to make sure that reinforced. So this was the network that we ended up with. And then this is the short, medium, long-term prioritization that came out of that process as well. And this is something that then fed through into the consultation that happened over the summer. So in terms of moving on to the walking side of things, we identified a central walking zone and 11 walking routes. We identified a core of a walking zone and looked at how that would be considered in the overall package. So one of the key things I thought would be important to talk about in terms of definition is the Corby Old Village Livable Neighbourhood, which is an area-based approach to providing investment, which is something that came out of the walking prioritisation. And that was to really look at, people don't particularly walk on one road, they walk to a location and they walk around that location, and how can we provide that investment to get that uplift in walking by taking a area-based approach. So whilst you'll see within the presentation and within the consultation materials the term livable neighbourhood, what we really mean by that is an area-based approach to investment. And within this slide, I've just provided a little bit of details about what is proposed within that area. So general, improved public realm, wayfinding, crossings, and in this location, particularly speed reduction was something that people were keen to see. And then that just kind of continues on in terms of the walking. So overall, what was the views of the Corby LC Whip? So there was overwhelming support for the LC Whip. There was a high proportion of neutrality to the consultation, and that may be subject, or that might be a result of a couple of things. There's a lot of consultation happening within Corby, so perhaps there was a little bit of a consultation fatigue. As was touched on before, there's the Smart and Connected Corby, which was also consulted, so that may also add to that consultation fatigue or the clarity around the consultation approach. And there was 14% of negative or mostly negative comments or views. So looking into that in some detail, I think, to summarize, there was a real concern about the quality of the network and the connectedness of the network, both in terms of how it is delivered and its timely delivery, but also kind of longer term and the maintenance of the network. Also a view that perhaps funding should be redirected, that there was a need for wider improvements to road conditions, potholes and footway condition was something that came up, and particular to this LC Whip was about timing and delivery, about how it connected to the developments that were being delivered nearby, and how that would drive increase in cycling. And then linking back to the Greenways, call for secondary routes, which I think is the balance between what the LC Whip's focus is on towns and cities, and perhaps what the Greenways focus is kind of wider connectiveness across North Northants, and a call for other areas to be included in the longer term prioritisation list for cycling investment. So in terms of how the routes were prioritised, we can see that the eastern and northeastern sections were seen as a priority, but they were relatively balanced within those three top priorities. Moving on to walking, similar calls around the quality of the investment, particularly around street lighting, which is something that came up quite a few times. And again, the longer term investment and maintenance of the improvements, the support for the area-based Corby Old Village investment, and then calls for walking improvements around Weldon, and then also Gretton, which is slightly outside of the LC whip, and perhaps something that can be discussed separately. And you can see there that between the town centre and the Corby Old Village, they were the top priority for people, which is not particularly surprising given what we heard from the last stage of the stakeholder feedback and then leading into the consultation. So that's a kind of clear priority for the community. So with those that feedback, it very much aligns with what we've heard before and what we've led into the Corby LC Whip development. So whilst we can respond to the overarching comments, some of the detailed comments will come into the next stage, which comes in the design and delivery of the LC Whip. So what we are looking at this stage is to take that consultation results forward to adopt the Corby LC Whip in early 2024. And with that adoption, that will enable us to move on to looking at the high priority schemes, which I've touched on, and think about how we design those up to then try and secure funding for the delivery of the LC Whip. So that's what I was going to say about the Corby LC Whip, just to give a couple of minute update on both the Kettering and the Wellingborough. So I know that you've seen Kettering at least twice before, and hopefully it won't be unfamiliar that it was adopted in the summer. We have commissioned some design work on the priority schemes, both across cycling and walking, which are being developed now. And once those are developed at a kind of pre-feasibility stage, we can start to try and source funding to deliver those. In terms of Wellingborough, as you may be aware, Wellingborough has had two kind of false starts. There's been two attempts to develop the Wellingborough LC Whip, and why those two haven't, the government guidance has changed within the delivery of those previous iterations. So what we are doing is we're doing a refresh and update for the Wellingborough LC Whip. And we're also responding to some of the feedback that we had at the last stakeholder workshop to look at the scope of the Wellingborough LC Whip and to expand it to include Higham Ferries and Rushden, which had previously been under separate documents. So we're doing the preparation for that piece of work to consolidate and update at the moment. And I envisage that we'll be back here speaking to you early in 2024. So that was, so that was a quick run through. I hope it wasn't too quick, but I also didn't want to take too much of the panel's time, given that you've heard some of this information before.
Thank you, Sally, for taking us through that. It's useful to see the feedback from the consultation from the Corby LC Whip, particularly around the percentages that support it, but then also the more detailed feedback around what people would like to see the focus on. And I know that we've discussed the LC Whips quite a few times here, which has been useful, I hope, for members. So open it up to any questions that people might have or comments. As I say, we have discussed it a few times, so that update is really useful. Just might be that there might not be any other questions. Okay, we've got a question from Councillor Bone.
Thank you, Chair. So it's not a question, Chair, it's just a comment really. the Corby LC whip, great. I'm just a little bit concerned about the progress of the Wellingborough and East LC whips, and I know that colleague just said that it's coming back to us early in 2024. Just a little bit concerned about the progress on those. So it was a muted comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Progress in the other ones is important, and I'm sure that the team looking at this are working through all of those bits carefully. Councillor Dell.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Sally. Thank you very much for the update. I just got a couple of comments and questions. I picked up that during the consultation for Corby, it seemed there was a bit more negative comments than I remember being in the Kettering LCWIP, and I wonder if this was related, because in the specific comments it mentioned about funding for maintenance and things. I wonder if that was picked up, potentially was like people saying, oh, you need to fix the potholes before you do all this. That kind of, I guess it's that kind of thing, because the way the consultation, if I remember correctly, the consultation was out at the same time there was there were a lot of potholes. And I can sort of see the public's perception of like, well, why would you build new segregated cycleways when the roads are in the right state? So I guess some of the negativity came from that, and unfortunately, that's a timing thing with the consultation and everything. But you mentioned, and especially for the Kettering one, about the funding potential, because I know that we've prioritised Kettering, it's been adopted and everything. What's the sort of rough timescales do you think on seeing some actual spade in the ground, sort of actually something being built, the funding being built, that kind of thing? What's the sort of timescale on that, if you can say that? And finally, Wellingborough High and Rushden, you mentioned it had two previous false starts. How far along did they get? Were there public consultations as part of that? Is the data accessible to see what people said that could be integrated into the new LC whip planning? That's my questions really.
Okay. If it's okay, I'll deal with the negative comments, and then I'll deal with Wellingborough, and then I'll deal with the funding for Kettering, if that's okay. Yes, the comment around the how we prioritize things in terms of potholes or investing in new infrastructure is something that we see in majority of our consultations. I think there was a slightly different strength in Corby as opposed to Kettering, which I think you've picked up on. There's lots of factors that may result that. It can be the time of year that you consult and the condition of our roads and how people are travelling. Summer, people tend to be out and about now, or it could be lots of different things. But yes, we did see a slightly different strength of comment around that, and also a slightly different strength, particularly around the pedestrian experience. So the condition of our footways as opposed to just the condition of the roads themselves. So that is something that we're aware of, and I think that is something to be mindful of when we do our investments, about responding to that and the investments being done high quality, and have a maintenance regime about them that ensure that they stay to a reasonable quality as well. In terms of the funding for Kettering and the development, and I would love to be able to say that we will be able to see a spade in the ground in Kettering in a certain date. We are at the behest of our funders, and we are at the behest of those funding rounds, so not in a position to be able to say that. But what I can say is the work that we're doing around that scheme design should be complete by the end of this financial year, which will enable us to move into next financial year in a strong position to be able to submit those funding bids. Then moving on to Wellingborough, the schemes, the two LC whips that were started, there was a significant amount of work being done for those. They went through the stakeholder feedback, they did some of the technical work, the desktop work to support those. So there's a lot that we can draw on to bring them back up to standard and to consolidate them. And that's something that we're working on now. We certainly acknowledge the effort that the community have put into helping us to develop them, and don't want to, start again. And in that way, we are able to do, you saw from the timeline of Corby that we started it in early 22, and we're now at the end of 2023. So that's a very long development window. It will be far more segmented for Wellingborough and the kind of eastern areas. So we should see a LC whip come forward, as I said, in early new year. So hopefully that helps to allay some of those concerns. There's a lot of work that's been done. There's a lot of work that can be drawn forward.
That's brilliant.
Thank you, Sally. Sorry, Councillor Dell.
With access, so the previous Wellingborough and Higham Rushden consultations, public consultations and everything, is that all in data consolidated? Do we have that in like a system like Commonplace, or is that is it easy to like? I'm just wondering how that's going to be run for the new one.
A combination. So obviously, after every consultation or engagement exercise that we do, we write that up and we collate that. So whether it's a stakeholder workshop or the consultation hub or Commonplace, we've both got the raw data and the summarized data. So we have all of that. So yes, we can pull all that through. I think that we will need to be looking at going back and saying, this is what you said, is this still appropriate? Is this still reflective of your view given the passage of time? But yes, we do have all of that information that we can use to develop the LCWEC.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Councillor Dell, did you want to say anything more? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Go to Councillor Bode now.
Thank you, Chair. Sally's just more or less answered what I was going to say. I think we, Wellingborough and the East LC Wits, we're going to have a chance of having another bite of the cherry. So we'll learn from the previous consultations and hopefully can move forward. So I think that's we've got enough data, haven't we, that we can move forward and improve. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think the real benefit is also you've got the Greenway strategy that's adopted, so you have that network fixed, which you didn't have before we got to this stage.
That's great. Okay, just double checking we haven't got any more points on the LC whip there. I suspect we'll probably discuss it again in the future, which is always a good thing, just to be able to ask some more questions and get updates. But thank you, Sally, for going through that with us today. Really useful to get that update and ask those questions.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our agenda for today. Again, thank you, members, for your input, and officers as well for the work that you've put in to bring these presentations to us and to take away the feedback as well. We will get dates around for the next meeting, which will be next year now. So thank you all for your input over the course of this year, and I'm sure we'll have another jam-packed year of EAP meetings next time round. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day.